Midjourney's new model, V5, is finally out, and oh my god, photorealism is the word. So if you're like me and you like making visual effects and like creating a cinematic, true to life aesthetic, you are absolutely going to love the results you get out of V5 right out of the box. So what we're going to do is compare and contrast V4 and V5 using the exact same prompt, observing the visual differences so you can start taking advantage of the strengths of this model in your own creations. So let's get right into it. Right off the bat with this UFO prompt, I was exceedingly impressed. Let's leave aside the fact that you've got immaculate shadows, the shrubbery, the reflections, the lens flare. It even models the smudges on the camera lens, which I absolutely love. And to make it extra wild, I threw in this like 360 equirectangular projection terminology into the prompt, and you can see it almost looked like a wraparound panorama. But this looks real. It's wild how good this is. Now, when you start talking about volumetric effects, so let's say you want to create this like iridescent nuclear explosion, it looks way less like digital art that you might do in Photoshop and far more like this multi-layer composite that you might put together with stock footage in After Effects or Nuke. In contrast, V4 definitely has that cartoony, painterly aesthetic to it right out of the box. It screams digital art, like someone painted this with a Wacom tablet in like Photoshop or Procreate. Again, awesome, but not exactly cinematic, if you will. V5 also got a huge boost with dynamic range. So if you just look at the contrast between the darkest points in the scene and the brightest points, you can see just like the gamut is much, much wider. And that's super important for creating this photorealistic, true to life aesthetic. This almost looks like a really well done scene in Unreal Engine 5. It's absolutely wild. Another thing I'm noticing with V5 is if you look through the windows, you can actually notice a lot of dimensional detail about the interior of a building. It looks pretty awesome. It gives the scene this like perceivable volume and depth with all these cues that are integrated into the generation. When you try to recreate the same solar punk prompt with V4, it unsurprisingly looks far more stylized, right? Like there's maybe a little bit of bloom on the edges, but if you notice the dynamic range just isn't as wide and it feels compressed. It feels flatter. I can't really see through the windows. I can't tell what's happening. This looks like 2D artwork versus a rendering of a 3D scene, which V5 absolutely nails. I've noticed that landmarks also got a boost. So in this case, I wanted to stage an alien invasion of London. This is the area near Westminster Abbey. Very iconic clock tower, Big Ben, and so forth, right? The Parliament's right there. And you can see all those elements have been nicely integrated. This is really pushing that caliber of a Corridor Crew VFX shot. Maybe it isn't at like Hollywood blockbuster just yet, but oh my God, is it getting close, right? Like you've got these amazing spaceships that are nicely lit and integrated into the environment. You've even got the reflections. In contrast, the older V4 model, as you can see here, looks more reminiscent of sci-fi concept art. Like I love the lighting in here. It's very dynamic. It's almost surrealistic, right? So it's a very different aesthetic that you get right out of the box, but critically, all the context is lost. I can't really tell if this is London. I mean, I guess I see like Big Ben kind of integrated, but it looks very different. It looks more like some alien landscape that's like kit bashing aspects of London together. Whereas V5 really retained that like context of that geospatial environment, which is super important when you're trying to tell stories that are set in the real world, right? Building on that sci-fi theme here, if you're visualizing this like futuristic squadron of jet fighters conducting this training exercise by a beach, I mean, these results look phenomenal. It could be something that's in like an Ender's Game movie. This totally starts hitting that Hollywood blockbuster quality in my eyes. It's certainly starting to get there. Or maybe this is perhaps what like at a VFX film school, like the best students would be producing creations like this. And now you can get it right out of the box with Midjourney. That is absolutely wild. Continuing that theme of stylization, V4 definitely leans more like digital art right out of the box, right? This looks better suited maybe for like a graphic novel and not a cinematic blockbuster. It's not bad again, but it's just different, right? So I suspect people will still keep using V4 for a while until they figure out how to prompt and get different kind of stylistic range from V5, which it is good at. You can do stylized things, but that's not the focus of this video. Next, I wanted to try something that's smaller scale. So this almost looks like an action figure commercial by Hasbro, right? You can really tell the tilt shift depth of field is very prominent. So it emphasizes the smaller scale of the objects and the scene itself, and it just sells this completely. Speaking of dynamic range, if you look at the edges, the edge lighting that's on this like V22 Osprey right over here is phenomenal. I'm not too happy with how the propellers look, but this is stuff that's easy enough to fix in Photoshop. So based on these results, and I did a couple others like this, I think product photography is going to get a huge boost with V5. You're going to be able to stage virtual shoots for products that don't exist, or start imagining products to facilitate whatever it is that you're trying to do, rather than having to learn a 3D software. So I think that's going to be awesome as well. Looking at the same prompt, the action figure prompt in V4, I can't really tell the scale of the scene. It looks a little bit more compressed. I will note some of the results look a little bit more painterly. So these two look a little bit more painterly to me than these two. So they almost look like concept art on the right side. And on the left, you're starting to see this Team America style aesthetic, but not very toy-like. It's almost some uncanny point between toys and like an actual photo. Another aspect that got a huge boost with V5 is just the rendition of well-known celebrities that will be undoubtedly in the training data, right? So in this case, I asked it to produce Obama and Bush smoking a cigar in the White House lawn, and their facial features are absolutely immaculate. I will say it looks more like a Marlboro cigarette than it does like a Cuban cigar, but the facial characteristic, the suits, I think the setup too, like sitting on a bench, it looks amazing. And the smoke effects are pretty cool too. So this reminds me a little about like Harold and Kumar too, if you know which scene I'm talking about. Back in V4, and it's like, stylistically, we're all over the place, right? But at the same time, the V4 model almost fuses Obama and Bush together into this like weird hybrid. What is that? That's like some weird averaging of like the Bushes and Obama, and it's just off, like not really useful. We need to remedy this ASAP. Yo, that is so much better. How about some like presidential drinking games instead? I absolutely love this camera person right here in the back too. It's like clearly being televised to your favorite cable news network. It's not exactly beer pong, which is what I asked for, but it's clearly they're playing like flip cup or something over here. So love the results again. You've got classic Obama with his like rolled up business casual attire, and you've got a fairly decent rendition of the White House in the background over here. Another celebrity example, Ice Cube finally looks like Ice Cube. If you want to make some album art, oh my God, you can have a blast of hypothetical albums that never actually existed. Go back to V4 and the older model kind of looks like Cube, but not quite Cube. It's just, again, this sort of uncanny place. Even if you have just one celebrity in the prompt, the rendition just is far from perfect, right? Of course, since I'm into visual effects and augmented reality, I had to try doing holograms. And these look like a VFX shot for like a HoloLens or Magic Leap commercial. This looks like the ILM X Lab cave setups that they have that have been around in academia forever. Same thing with this. This looks like some hybrid between like a Mandalorian wraparound LED setup and some sort of a cave setup. And this bottom right one just straight up looks like Jarvis. So, you know, if you want to create like Iron Man aesthetic or science fiction Marvel Avengers scenes, like go wild. The results are phenomenal. And especially if we compare this to V4 with the exact same prompt, you know, I will say I love the holographic semi-translucent aesthetic here, how it like falls off from opaque colors to this sort of more wireframey holographic look right there. That looks good, but I mean, the anatomy is super wonky. Like what's going on over there with the face and the hat and the hands and even the legs, just everything looks misproportioned. It almost looks like this is the concept art for this actual VFX final shot. That to me is basically in a nutshell the difference between V4 and V5. V4 is all about like stylized concept art, digital art aesthetics, and V5 is about photorealism. Since we're talking about cinema, you have to have like awesome aerial drone establishing shots. So I tried to key in some drone satellite type perspectives, and the geospatial nerd in me is very impressed. This looks like a realistic terrain. I think they absolutely nail the coastal setting, right? The waves, the boats, the nighttime lighting, everything looks very realistic. This looks like something you might capture with a 1-inch or larger sensor drone, right? In the real world. Let's compare that to V4. And again, it looks stylized. The terrain doesn't look realistic. The perspective and the proportions are a little wonky, especially in this one. It almost looks like you're trying to squeeze things into the generation canvas. And over here, the reflections, and this feels like it's like floating in midair. It's very untethered from reality. It feels off and definitely not true to life. So in summary, V5 makes it easier than ever before to get photorealistic results. So purveyors of this sort of cinematic realism will rejoice, and any use case that wants to more factually or more faithfully create a rendition of the real world will benefit. So I think architectural visualization, product photography, digital models, all that type of stuff is going to really, really benefit. If you want to really start fleshing out a cinematic masterpiece, oh my God, it is amazing. And let me tell you, combining it with Gen 1 is going to be an amazing combination. So that is going to be my next test. So if you found this video useful, please be sure to like, tell me in the comments what you'd like to see next, and of course, subscribe to stay tuned for more content. You can also follow me on Twitter and subscribe to the Creative Technology Digest, where you can get all of this information, especially creative technology workflows and distilled analysis on all the latest stuff that's happening, neatly packaged and sent to your inbox. I love sharing my workflows with people, so the support is much appreciated. Thank you, and I will see y'all in the next one.